In today's episode, we're speaking to Garrett Gunderson. Garrett is the founder of a Wealth Factory, an Inc. 500 company that has educated 350,000 entrepreneurs on effective ways to grow cash flow, plug financial leaks, and reach economic independence without sacrificing, scrimping, or becoming a Scrooge. He is New York Times and Wall Street's #1 bestselling author of personal finance book, Killing Sacred Cows, Overcoming the Financial Myths That Are Destroying Your Prosperity, and as well as what would the Rockefellers do? How the wealthy get and stay that way, and how you can do it too. And 2 more books, Money Unmasked and I Am Money. Let's speak to Garrett and find out how he changed his life by changing his mindset. Let's find out. And remember, if you want to upgrade your money mindset, then click on the link www.millionairefoundations.com and watch my free training. Welcome. This is Gull, your money mindset expert. And today we're talking to the wonderful Garrett Gunderson. Welcome, Garrett.
Thanks for having me. I sure appreciate it.
Thank you so much for coming and joining us and having this conversation, Garrett. We're excited to have you. Garrett, everyone's heard your intro. They know how fabulous you are, but please, in your own words, tell everybody what it is that you do.
So I'm using entertainment to educate specifically around the topic of money. So I've written a kid's book around money.
Okay.
And then also have a book that's recently come out called Money Unmasked. And those are 2 of my 9 books that I've written. So I like to get out and speak. I've also done a comedy tour, 2 of them, as a matter of fact. I filmed a comedy special around the topic of money because look, comedians talk about stuff all the time, like politics, because they kind of know about that. They don't talk a lot about money because they don't know a lot about that. But in 1998 is when I started in the financial business. Now, I was mainly like peddling mutual funds and life insurance for the first couple years, not really knowing what I was doing. But in the year 2000, that's when my education really started, because the market went down and my clients started losing money. And I didn't want to just tell them they were in it for the long haul, or the market was on sale, or to dollar cost average. So I flew somewhere once a month for 26 straight months, interviewing the best minds, going to whatever events I could. And I really became an efficiency expert. How can they keep more of what they make without cutting back? How could they save on tax or on interest or on, non-performing fees with their investments, or duplicate coverages or improper structure with their insurance? And so it was about boosting their bottom line without having to miss out on life along the way.
Amazing. So talk us through this. Now, I love this. I love the fact that you're teaching about money through comedy, through entertainment. I think that's probably the easiest way to learn, because money has so many emotions and has so many traumas attached to it. And I deal with money primarily. And I know that a lot of people just like to brush under the carpet or ignore it or even deal with it. And it doesn't matter the amount of money they make. They could be, cleaning the toilets, or they could be a CEO of Fortune 500 company. If they haven't sorted out the money in their head in terms of emotionally sorted out their relationship with money, both of them will end up in the same place, because they'll end up spending more than they have. Obviously, one having more debt than the other. And actually, funnily enough, the more money you make, and if you have a terrible relationship with it, you're going to be far worse off than somebody who is cleaning the toilets, because they have less debts. They can only take out so much debt. So talk us through where did this idea come to you about combining this money with entertainment, which I think is a great idea, by the way, being a money mindset person as well. But where did it dawn on you that I need to combine these 2 different genres, money mindset, and comedy and entertainment?
I had this mission, or this notion, that I wanted to help liberate 1 million people to become financially independent and change their family's financial future and destiny. And so 1 million seemed like I wouldn't know how to do it when I said it. Like, how am I going to reach that number of people? And so in going about that journey, I started to recognize, millions of people want to be educated, but billions of people want to be entertained. And I started to think, how many people were getting their advice from comedians and actually adopting philosophies, whether it was political, like I said before, or they're just, and I was like, man. And I was in this course where the teacher was talking about people remember 3 times more if they're scared or if they laugh.
Mm.
And I was like, well, I don't want to scare people. That we'll let the news do that. They've got
They
that
do,
cornered.
they do a good enough job of that. They've got, they
So I was
really
like,
do.
and look, I had always had a love for comedy. It was like one of
Mm.
my first memories. So I'm in a state where half the people are Mormon, right, religiously, and my
Mm.
dad's family was Mormon. My
Wow.
mom's
Okay.
family was like hardcore Catholic, like go to church 7 days a week, came over from Italy. And the only time I could get away with swearing was by telling jokes. And
Mm.
so both sides of the family didn't have a lot in common, but the one thing they had in common was the language of humor. My uncles were hysterical. My mom had this infectious laugh. My dad had a dry sense of humor. And so from the time I was 5 years old, I felt like comedy was love. I felt like if you connected from a joke, like you
Mm.
bonded and you weren't worried about what happened in the past or scared about what's going on in the future, but you simply could have this moment with another human being. And the funniest things are things that we haven't spoken, but we've thought. And this
Yeah.
is what kind of takes off in culture. These
Yeah.
ideas in our head, they were like, well, I'm not going to say that because it feels scary or
Yeah.
controversial or might make me feel like an outcast. And then a comedian speaks it and you're like, wait, that's what I was thinking. And that's why we have that spontaneous moment. And so it wasn't really until 2017 that I got into comedy. We took the summer and went to Italy, which was a big deal because my dad was a coal miner. My grandfathers were coal miners. My great grandfather was a coal miner. So to think about having a summer of leisure wasn't really how our mind worked.
Mm.
Our mind worked was you work hard, and by working hard, you can live this life.
Yeah.
But what I figured out early was hard work with the wrong philosophy still equals bankruptcy or frustration or
100%.
limitation,
100%.
right?
Yeah.
And so I was like, when my wife spoke, like 18 months before she went, she's like, what if we spent the summer in Italy? Because our kids are only going to be young once. And I just want to have this experience. And I've been on the road speaking from the time we were married. So we'd never spent that number of days together. Good news is she still likes me. We're still together after that summer. So that's good. But I had downtime for the first time in my life. Like I was
Yeah.
we're in Italy. It's a slower pace. I got
Much
into
slower.
cappuccinos,
Mm.
right? 4-hour dinners, and I just would wake up and have this time to think. And I was like, what do I want in life? Like, what if life felt more artistic and less robotic?
Yeah.
And right when we came home, we're celebrating my birthday at this baseball game, and I made my wife laugh, which is hard to do sometimes. And she said, where did you get that joke? I'm like, from my own brain. That was what I told her, from my own brain. And she's like, that's kind of funny. I translated that to, I'm a comedic god. That's what I heard her say. and the next thing I know, the first event I spoke at that Sunday, after taking the whole summer off, the guy introduced me as being hilarious. And I was like, oh, damn, I'm about to get a financial talk. And he said, I'm hilarious. I told a few jokes. The crowd laughed. And so I immediately called my friend that was a runner-up on Last Comic Standing and said, I want to do comedy. Scheduled an open mic, did the open mic, and he said, you should start opening for me. So 2 years after that, I was opening for his special that was being filmed, and a Hollywood manager was in the room, and he's like, I don't think anyone's really done this financial comedy thing. He's like, I think you should do it. And so I ended up filming a comedy special called The American Ream, drop the D, right? The ream of like people being stressed and overspending and all the things that we're talking about, but not understanding money, and telling all these jokes, filmed the special. I just signed a contract barely for the distribution of that special. And so, yeah, that's where I was like, entertainment's the gateway to transformation. Entertainment is the better language to reach people that would never pay attention because money feels intimidating, frustrating, impossible. And I'm like, but if we can laugh, we can learn. If we can learn, then we can start addressing these things that people have been avoiding for far too long.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And I totally agree with you. And I think that is the best way to teach the next generation. As you were talking, and I believe you got a book for children. I'm Money for Kids as well. I think that's probably the best way to teach these important principles to the next generation. Yes, when it comes to, children do learn from you as parents. They watch what you do and how you behave and so forth. So I'm pretty confident my kids have a really, really positive outlook towards money. But at the moment, it's very careless. It's not very interested, because for them money is boring. You know, they don't want to listen to mommy talk about mindset and so forth. And other people may find it interesting, but they don't. And it would just occur to me, had I someone like you talking to them in a funny way about money, they would be more interested. They would learn the principles. They would understand the concepts of, you know, profit loss sheet, and what it is about paying yourself and first and whatever else. And what I go on about, the principles of profit first, the book, and how that's important in all areas of your life and so forth. At the moment, when I start talking like that, you see the eyes glaze over, they're switched off, right? However, if we're able to articulate those concepts in a comical way, in a way that will retain in the memory, as well as understanding those concepts and be interested in hearing about those concepts, that would be amazing. So have you done anything like that for kids? Like, have you done a program like this for kids, or have you done a talk for kids or whatever? Because I think there's definitely a gap in the market for sure.
So I tried, okay? I tried, and it was not the best. I'll tell you what happened. So it worked okay. I took my kids, my nephews, and my niece, and I set up a classroom here at my house.
Okay.
And I had my oldest film it. And it was called Schooled. And it was, you don't want teachers on salaries that already have a big curriculum of things to do to add money to the equation, because they probably don't understand it themselves.
Oh, 100%.
So,
you don't get
right.
teachers to teach you money, because they have zero concept of money themselves.
Right. So basically, I realized I started talking over their heads. Now, I did make lasting impact on all of them in that, but that's why I teamed up with this woman, Julia Cook, because Julia has sold over 3 million copies of children's books.
Right.
And I said, here's my content. What can we do to take this content and make it accessible to kids? And she made it playful, and she made it fun, and like really took and shaped it in a way that kids could understand. So we are now working on an animated series behind this. And so, yes, we're working on it. I learned that on my own, I don't speak the language that kids do, because I start getting too fast into the financial concepts. And there was a study that The Economist did years ago, almost a decade ago, that if they taught money in schools, kids were worse off than not being taught. And that's the problem with improper scarcity thinking and reductionist thinking, and not addressing the mindset or the individual. And that's like in my book Money Unmasked, I make sure to help people understand their money personas, because we view things differently based upon those money personas. And that persona, there's two sides. There's a shadow side that comes from scarcity, and there's the winning side that comes from co-creation, collaboration, and a more abundant vision that's about value at the core, instead of about hoarding, which a lot of people kind of unfortunately get into because of things like when my great-grandfather left Italy and didn't get to see his wife for 7 years, and met his daughter for the first time when she was 7 years old, because he couldn't understand money and had to separate from them. So like that creates scarcity from a generational standpoint. So the good news is, by doing the comedy special, first and foremost, my kids have watched it over and over again because they find it funny. And this was when they were 13 and 15 years old. And that led to conversations where they were asking me the questions, not me trying to tell them about what I knew and hope that they were interested. So it created a level of interest and inquiry that changed things. Now, the kids' book, as we've been passing this out and as Julia's been reading it to kids at schools, like it definitely has shaped, but this is more like a kindergarten through third grade.
Yeah, it looks really young, but that's I think, but then that's the age that you want to instill this interest and love for money. And I say love in a very broad context. I'm not talking from the conceited idea of greed, which normally is associated with the love for money. That's not where we're coming from. I always talk about love and respect for money the way you would have a best friend, because unless you love and respect money in the same way that you respect a best friend, you're going to have a very difficult relationship with it. And the one person after yourself that you have to, the one person that you're going to have a relationship for the rest of your life after yourself, before your spouse, before your child, before anybody else, is money. That's it. And people fail to realize that.
And that's why we make money the main character. Money's the main likable character, because who better to teach you about money than money itself?
Yes.
And so and the whole message is, it's called I Am Money and I Don't Grow on Trees. Because if I did, I wouldn't be worth very much. It turns out I'm worth quite a bit. And it says money can be so helpful to handle the basics. But after the basics, it's about earning, spending, saving, and when you're abundant because you have more than you even need, giving.
Giving
And
back.
the best investment is to invest in yourself and develop your skill sets. And so this is kind of the concepts of the book, and it's pretty interesting. It talks about credit cards in this, and he wears his credit card coats, or he wears his crypto clothes, or so it kind of gets to introduce that as like different ways that money could show up. And I think it makes it very simple. But I think the magic of this book is parents will read it to kids, and they don't have to say they didn't understand certain things in here. But because they're reading it to their kids and they're not going, like, a lot of people don't learn about money because they're defending their actions to this point.
Oh, yeah, they're defending the beliefs.
Hard.
Yeah, they're defending the beliefs.
I did everything I could, and it's like, no, we all make money mistakes. Even I've made many money mistakes, and I'm in this world.
Every mistake under the sun I've made, I promise you.
Right. So it's like, so that's the thing, is we're all born into this world without an instruction manual for money. And yet we all have it. And it's like, oh, here you go. I hope you don't blow it. But a lot of people do because they're afraid to really look. And by the way, I think our relationship to money is merely a reflection of our relationship to ourselves.
100%. 100%. Our self-worth. So what we believe is our self-worth determines on how much money we allow ourselves to keep.
Yes. And otherwise, even people that earn a lot of it might be like burning through it. And like you said something so valuable, is that people could end up with more money and worse off because they spend optimism, or they can get a bigger loan because of that earnings, and they think that they're going to make just more every month, but then it doesn't happen. And I think a lot of people in these money personas, one of the money personas is a striver, and a striver wants status. And a lot of times what they'll do is buy things to show wealth, but it doesn't necessarily lead to lasting wealth because they have to keep up with that image. And if they have a tough month, then they start to try to fill up that bucket by working harder, and then they don't have time with their family or take time for their health. And it's all about this kind of show that isn't fulfilling. And that's, you know, and no matter how much they earn, it still doesn't give them the love that they wanted. And that's one money persona. Another money persona is the miser. The miser just wants to hold on to everything they have because they're afraid they might lose it. This is my family. They put cash in coffee cans and buried them in the cellar. You know, I had an aunt that actually applied for welfare, but she had $550,000 or $530,000 in her savings account, so she got denied. But poverty is a mindset. It's a perspective. And if the perspective is, I've got to hold on to what I got to preserve, there's never enough. Because inflation's working against them, because their mind's working against them, because even if they have money, they feel poor. They spend 10 hours clipping coupons at the expense of earning more money, and no one shrinks their way to wealth. But those people believe that they can pinch their way to wealth, but in pinching pennies, they lose sight of value, right? And it's really like these three measures of worth. Price is what we pay, cost is the economic impact, and value is our feeling of satisfaction. For people to be financially free, it's about money no longer being the primary reason or excuse for doing or not doing something. It's a consideration, just not the consideration. So when we can put value first, when we think, do I enjoy this? Do I feel fulfilled by this? Is this something that I want? Then what's the cost, which is the economic impact? You know, some things can have a high price and a low cost. The easiest example always comes to mind is I can have a really good accountant that can be a little bit higher price, but they save me tax legally and ethically. Maybe I pay them more, but I end up with more in the end. You know, and so a lot of people get stuck in price and price alone, but now they spend too much time trying to save money at the expense of creating value, and creating value is the game because money follows value. So how do we become better value creators? That's the question.
Yeah. I mean, when you were saying this, I was thinking about in business partnerships as well. It's when you're surrounded by people, most of the time you're surrounded by people who have similar beliefs to you. If that's the case, otherwise you wouldn't be in that circle. And those beliefs are reinforced. So even if you want to break free, you have to reassess who you're hanging out with and what kind of discussions, what kind of conversations you're having. And it occurs to me that, you know, even in business partnerships or or colleagues for that matter, you know, I come from a very abundant mindset. Okay, this is we need it, we can create it. And I have done that, and my life has shown I've taken quantum leaps forward in my income because of that mindset. I take what I call calculated risks. I don't take unnecessary risks. And in the past, by the way, my calculations have been wrong, so they look like unnecessary risks, but I thought they were calculated. Anyway, my mistakes. I've learned from them.
They're expensive tuition.
Really expensive tuition, but it's lessons I've learned. But those lessons have allowed me to take serious calculated risks now, which allowed me to quantum leap my, tenfold my income pretty much every 3 to 5 years now. And so, but I've noticed, and because of that, I'm not afraid of debt. I know how to, I'm not using debt to, furnish my lifestyle. I'm not going on buying holidays with the debt. I'm actually using it to reinvest in other businesses and so forth. That's a very different concept to people who are afraid of debt. And that comes from mindset, because they're afraid of utilizing money and leveraging money. And it comes back to, again, your relationship with money. How afraid are you? If you're hoarding money, you're going to be afraid of debt and you don't want it to go away. Whereas if you take calculated risks and you use other people's money, which is, leveraging, using debt and using it as leverage, you can grow your wealth exponentially over the next 5 to 10 years. What are your thoughts on that?
So I have a lot of thoughts on that. So first off, what's helpful for context is there's 4 different types of expenses, and most people collapse the word expense and think it's bad. Immediately, like expense has a negative connotation. But if we break it down to 4 types, the first one being a destructive expense, destructive expenses would be like borrowing to consume. I borrow for a trip, I don't have the money, I come back, the trip's great memories, but there is no asset to help me, create cash flow. A destructive expense, I think heroin's always a destructive expense. I don't know, I haven't tried it, but if it's ever the zombie apocalypse, I might try it then. I might be like, okay, world's ending, I want to see what's so good about this stuff and just overdose on it. But anyway, those are destructive expenses, right? The second type of expense is a lifestyle expense. This is something like clothes, utilities, food. Just pay cash. Pay cash for lifestyle expenses rather than borrow. So we eliminate destructive expenses, we manage lifestyle expenses, and then the third type of expense is a protective expense. Protective expense could be estate planning, asset protection, insurance coverage, education so that we know how to mitigate and manage risk better, right? Liquidity, just having a peace of mind fund so we have enough cash on hand if we have a change in career or a health issue or need to take time off for a family member. Those are protective expenses, and wealthy people do better at protective expenses than the middle class or even poor people do, because they think, well, I don't have the money for it. But the thing is, you don't have to have $1 million to get in $1 million mess up. So we want to transfer risk, and that's what protective expenses are. So we address protective expenses, and the game changer is the 4th type of expense, a productive expense. I spend $1, more than $1 comes back to me. See, a lot of people go, yeah, well, what should my budget be? Well, if you put $1 in and more than $1 comes back, don't budget. Just do that as long as you can manage it and it's effective. So we want to increase our productive expenses, address our protective expenses, manage our lifestyle expenses, and eliminate our destructive expenses. So that takes me to the word debt, because the word debt is confusing for people. Because if we use the generally accepted accounting principles definition of debt, it simply means we go to a balance sheet. A balance sheet is an asset versus a liability. That's all a balance sheet is. It gives us a snapshot of our finances. It's a way to look and say, where are we right now? Right? And that balance sheet, if we have more assets than liabilities, that's called equity or net worth. We want to be in a positive equity or positive net worth situation. Now, if we have more liabilities than assets, the opposite of equity is debt. So obviously we don't want to have more liabilities than assets, but what most people get confused about is they think any liability is a debt, but that's not true. If you could go borrow $500,000 today to buy a business worth $1 million, if you have that $500,000 loan, most people will say you are $500,000 in debt, but the reality is, based upon a balance sheet, you're actually $500,000 in equity. Because if you turn around and sold the business for $1 million, you pay off the loan of $500,000 and you still have $500,000. But most people get confused and think anytime they borrow, it's debt. That's not true. You might borrow and find yourself in equity if you know how to manage it. Now, on the other hand, if I know nothing about real estate and I go buy a property being like, I think this is going to be great, and then all of a sudden I don't have a renter in there, or I don't know how to Airbnb it, and I'm like, oh man, this is sucking wind, and I want to sell it. If I have to sell it quick, I might have to sell it for less than what I owe on it, and now I have that debt that I owe. So I want to kind of like differentiate debt versus liability. So And the way I look at it is, because some people use the term good debt and bad debt, and I know
Yeah.
what the concept is,
Mm.
but the fact is there's efficient and effective loans and inefficient and ineffective loans.
Mm-hmm.
So if I borrow to consume, that is a consumption behavior
Yeah.
that leads to debt. If I borrow to produce, then what I'm looking at is that an efficient or inefficient loan. So if I can put a renter in there that gets me $1,000 a month, and the loan costs me $700 a month, that's a positive $300 a month of cash flow if I can sustain it. Now I have to consider maintenance, and I have to consider taxes, and I have to consider other factors. But ultimately, that's a positive cash flow. And so what most people don't connect is your balance sheet to your income statement. What the balance sheet is the assets versus liabilities. The income statement is your income versus your expenses. Otherwise, you mentioned as a P&L, right? Profit and loss. So this is the methodology. How can I capitalize my assets to create cash flow for income? And how do I address my liabilities so that my expenses are minimal, or at least productive expenses instead of destructive expenses? And so there's too many people that don't have a concept of what's called investor DNA. Your investor DNA is, what kind of investor are you? What's your core values, your core competencies, and your core drivers? And when you invest, say, what kind of investor are you? Some people are good at real estate, some people are not. Some people are good at commercial real estate, but not on residential. Other people are good at fix and flip, where they're buying a property, fixing it up, and selling it. Other people are not. Some people are good at single family homes. Other people are better at duplexes. So even within that category, where are you informed? Because risk isn't in the investment. Risk is in you, the investor. What type of investor are you? If you know your investor DNA, you might say, I'm good at business acquisition, but I'm not good at real estate. Or I'm really good at creating intellectual property, but I'm not really good at real estate. Again, find your lane and double down on investing in things that you know. Align your investor DNA with those investments and focus on cash flow versus just waiting for 30 years hoping that your investments pay off. That's what far too many people do. They think that money is a function of three factors. I know I'm talking a lot here because you got me all charged up. But the first thing, the first factor is this is a false belief that it takes money to make money. It doesn't take money to make money.
No.
Right. You can make money on your money. Absolutely. But it takes being resourceful. It takes adding value. It takes serving others. It takes value and exchange to make money. It's value and exchange. So when we believe it takes money to make money, that's what people tell us that want our money. And so a lot of people go, well, I'm just going to save 10% of my income and wait for 30 years and hope it all works out. The second thing that's faulty, they're told, is high risk equals high return. No, you have certain knowledge other people don't. They allow you to get your income to double or 10x every 3 to 5 years. That is not by taking, you said calculated risk instead of risk. Calculated risk means you're mitigating and managing risk aligned with your investor DNA. So high risk equals high return is some dumb idea Wall Street had to convince people to separate themselves from their money and go, oh, high risk equals high return. Well, guess what? Everyone thinks they want to take risk until they lose money. Then nobody wants to take risk. So we want to mitigate it. And then the third thing that's faulty is people are told, you're in it for the long haul. That doesn't sound good. Long haul doesn't sound good. When does the long haul end? When you die? Like 30 years is a long time from now. AI might be controlling everything 30 years from now. Who knows?
The Matrix Unleashed.
I'm all about what I believe in is cash flow, plugging financial leaks and being efficient, mitigating risk, and finding ways to be more resourceful. So it's a different framework, right? So how do we capitalize our assets to create more cash flow? And how do we manage our liabilities so that we utilize the right things instead of leveraging things we don't understand? And so for me, the model of leverage is leverage mental and relationship capital leading to financial capital rather than leveraging financial capital when you don't know what you're doing, which leads to loss. So
100%. When we were talking through that, and I was going through in my mind, and I've tried everything under the sun. I'm one of those people who has to go and been trying for the last 15 years. And property is something where I got into very early on, and I became a property millionaire in my mid-20s. By the time I was 27. However,
that's when 27 was when I did too. So
awesome. But there was a property crash thereafter. I was a millionaire for like a year.
I then went at 29 back to not being a millionaire 2 years
Same,
later. I was like,
same here.
this
So yeah,
really sucks.
yeah,
You mean
yeah,
it doesn't just go up all the time?
yeah, it
That's
goes down as
stupid.
well. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, and I sort of realized there onwards, and I've kept property in my back pocket, and I've done a little bit with property, but I've not been fully invested in property itself. I've been looking at businesses, and what I've realized now is, after having various businesses, as you said, I think my investor DNA is towards businesses. I do like those. I like M&As. I like, going into the companies and doing X, Y, and Z. And I have a natural affiliation for it. I'm good at marketing. I picked up various skills throughout my different businesses, even those ones which didn't work out. But I've acquired skills from every single one, which actually now come in very handy while I'm building other businesses and merging them together and building a portfolio. So going back to the point, you have to understand who you are and take your lessons as they come. And I know now when I look at property, I think it's great. I think property is great for those who can do it. But when I look at it, I think it's so much headache for the returns. Whereas I can go and buy a business and have cash flow coming. For the exact point that you just mentioned, if I was to make for one of the businesses, I'm taking 15K as monthly cash flow. In order for me to get 15K cash flow, God knows how many properties I would have to buy. And and work through them. And I'm thinking, oh my God, look at the headache. And it doesn't make sense to me. Now looking where I am in my financial life. But at one point in time, making £300 or £400 or £500 per property seemed like a good idea. Now it seems stupid to me, but that's just where I am at the moment. But it comes back to in terms of your your money DNA or financial DNA, whatever term you gave. But recognizing it, and I recognize it, so I'm quite, I've come along, didn't call it that, but that's the realization I have. But I think that's what we need to work towards. We need to work out, where are we? Some people are good at crypto, some people are good at doing Amazon FBA, some people are doing something else. Whatever your affinity is, whatever you're naturally talented towards, which makes you happy and you enjoy it and you have a natural talent for.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. Well said.
Okay, so on that note, we're gonna wrap up. I want you to share something for us, though. I think we got so derailed and talked about other things. We forgot to mention about your personal life. So you mentioned the fact that you come from this sort of family which is really about holding money, and because of the generational ways. How did you personally break free from it? How did you work around it? How did you say, okay, now this generational curse, so to speak, ends with me. I'm not going to pass it to my kids, and I'm going to change it for myself. So what did you do specifically?
I got acknowledged at this event when I was young in the business of finance. And this woman, her name's Nancy, saw me in the hallway, and I recognized her because of some of the clients she had. And I just went up and talked to her, and she's like, I'm really excited for you. This is the first step. But as you start making more money, you're going to be in a different conversation with different people and see they view money differently than you see it right now. And I was smart enough to be like, what do you mean? Like, because I respected her. And when she said, I was like, what do you mean? She's like, well, let me ask you a few questions. And she starts asking these questions. And I'm like, well, yeah, my wife and I can have kids once this amount of money is in the bank. We live in an apartment, even though we can afford a house, because I just want to, have this much grow in my net worth. And everything was about scrimping, saving, sacrificing, delaying, and deferring. And then she just said, I wonder what it's like living in the financial prison you built for your wife. I was like,
wow.
Oh, I'm an asshole. That's what I said in my head. I was like, oh. And I just remember it hit me. And I called my wife because we were looking for this place to live. And I gave such a ridiculously small budget that she was really struggling to find something. And I was like, babe, I realized we fight over budgeting, over the heating bill being too much, over you buying stuff for your classroom. And it's because I'm a dick. I'm just sorry. I didn't realize. And I sat up against this post in Vegas at a hotel, and the session lets out and tears are rolling down my cheeks. And my wife was really awesome about it. And she's like, I get, it's fine. You and this is what she said that was so helpful. She goes, you're just doing what you thought was best for our family.
Which is the truth.
Which was the truth. And so I was like, okay. And so that was the first pivotal moment. And so what I told her, I said, why don't we look for a home together that we love? And let's look at a reasonable amount. This is what I'm making. I don't believe we should buy a home that is the price is twice what I make, if it's within that range. And so we found this home. I started hosting study groups there. I started having friends over because it was an awesome place to entertain, and my wife was able to design stuff. And even though it was so funny the first night we were there, because we had a TV that was the smallest TV ever in a place for a big TV, but we just sat there and laughed. But it was like that was the first like shift for me. And then I was like, okay, who else do I know that thinks more abundantly than I do about money? Because now I was aware of the scarcity. Before I just wasn't aware.
Exactly. You have to be aware that you're stuck in this paradigm, and now you're about to break free, but you need to recognize we're in a paradigm first, you know?
Yeah. And so I just started to recognize, I was like, where are their footprints of failure? And I had these business partners that were older than I was and very abundant. I used to judge the hell out of them. They'd go on vacation, and one of them hired a photographer. I was like, why wouldn't you just like get your own little, disposable camera? And they would go like scuba diving at night, which was more expensive. I'm like, just go on like everything. I was just judging them. And again, realizing, oh, I'm the a-hole. I'm spending all this time in judgment instead of value creation. Have all these expectations for people that are about my fears and inadequacies and insecurities, because I'm afraid that I wouldn't be a good provider or I could protect my family. And that was actually preventing me from adding more value. So as soon as I had that shift, and as soon as I started to like co-create and think about expansion, everything started to grow much faster. It broke free. And I even had this other mentor. Her name's Bab Smith. She runs a program called Strategic Coach with Dan Sullivan, and it's a really great program. They actually have it in the UK as well as the United States. But she was like, you need to take more time off. I was like, what do you mean? Like, I'm busy. And all of a sudden I took more time off and still made more money. So I started to realize there's narratives that we get stuck in of the way things are. Hard work, bad philosophy, limited results. So I started to say, what would a winning game look like? What would a life look like that I don't want to retire from? What things do I love to do? What could I enjoy? And how do I want to serve others and solve problems and add value? And I just took time to think instead of just being stuck in the doing. And that was like, and I just have constantly been in these conversations because I'm not impervious to scarcity. It still happens, but I'm aware of it now. And instead of being stuck in it for days or weeks or months, I'm stuck in it for hours or minutes. So it's just that awareness is the first step. And then conversation with people who are more abundant or further along or can ask you questions you can't ask yourself in those times.
100%. 100%. And I agree with absolutely everything you said. I think it is becoming aware. And once you have that awareness, it leads you down the rabbit hole, actually, and you uncover so many different facets of your life, of your thinking, because everything's connected to everything else. How you do one thing is how you do everything. And you begin to realize if you're scarce with money, you'll be scarce with time, and also with your health and other things in relationships. And it impacts every area of your life, really. But it starts with becoming aware of where you are right now. Well, on that note, we're going to wrap up. So Garrett, tell us, how can we connect with you? Where can we find you on the internet?
GarrettGunderson.com is my website. And if you click on musings, I actually write. ChatGPT does none of the work. I actually write a blog. I comment and respond to any comments on the blog. I do have videos I post 3 times a week or more to YouTube as well, Garrett Gunderson TV or Garrett.live in your browser. If you go youtube.com/Garrett Gunderson TV, you can subscribe to that. And I actually do respond to most comments, especially the mean ones. I like to respond to very snarky, and I'm never mean back. I just am mostly like, yeah, someone should kick this guy's ass, it's that kind of stuff. So about myself. So those are kind of some of the best ways. And I have a couple books that they can have for free, GarrettGunderson.com/offer. They can download Killing Sacred Cows, my first New York Times bestseller, and What Would The Rockefellers Do, my best-selling book that I've done. So those 2 are kind of on me.
Wonderful.
And my new book, Money Unmasked, moneyunmasked.com, my new book, which is how we got together.
So if you are listening to us on the podcast, the links that Garrett has just mentioned will be in the show notes. And if you're watching us on YouTube, down below in the description section, we'll have all the links that Garrett has just mentioned. Go check him out. I'm going to, and see how he can help you reshape your relationship with money. Well, thank you so much, Garrett, for today's episode and for this uncanny and really, really interesting conversation. But we have to have you back on Money Talkies. But thank you so much for today.
Look forward to it.
And thank you for listening to me and Garrett today on Friday Feature. I will be back with another amazing guest, finding out how they changed their life by changing their mindset. Until the next time we meet, this is Gull signing off. Take care and bye for now.